32 degrees and light mist. 32 degrees, continued light mist. 32 degrees, more light mist. Don't know exactly why it all happened the way that it did that day, but it certainly did. Turned out to be probably the greatest weather-related emergency in the city of Sioux Falls history. But as I look back 5 years ago today, and yeah, it seems like yesterday, team, there was one word that to me kind of brings back everything, and that is the word team. In my years of having the honor and the pleasure to serve this great city, it was a team approach that ultimately got us through that emergency in just such a grand way. We'll have Mark and Regan and Don talk about the devastating impact to our city, but certainly we all did rally around together to ultimately make good things happen. Just so proud of our city, proud of the people that cared about our city, and yes, they came from all over this area, all over the state, and yes, all over the country to ultimately make this a safe place to live and to get us back to a sense of normalcy. And that was truly one of the goals, is how quickly could we get back to normal, living, working, and playing even with the ice storm. And I'm not going to talk much longer, but there is another kind of memory that really kind of sits out there for me. And that is when FEMA showed up. This is a group that they go all over the country, and they work with these other cities, these other states, to try to get them through these emergencies that happen. Well, when FEMA showed up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota that day, they were just trying to figure out, how did you folks do it? How did you get back to this sense of normalcy so quickly when other cities, other towns, other states were not able to do it on their own? Well, guess what? That's what we do here in Sioux Falls. That's what we do here in South Dakota. We've been doing it for generations. A barn burns down out there on someone's farm. Well, guess what? We rebuild it very, very quickly, and we get back to a sense of normalcy on the farm. Someone's business has some challenges in a small town or great city. We help rebuild that business so they can go back serving the community. And yeah, when it came to city of Sioux Falls, it's what we do. Neighbor helping neighbor, the way we used to do it in the olden days, and we're still doing it today. One of my proudest times as the mayor was serving this great city 5 years ago during the ice storm. I'll never forget it. I was so dang proud of you then, Sioux Falls, and I'm dang proud of you now. I have the esteemed pleasure to introduce Mark Cotter, and Mark will kind of take us back in terms of the public works impact to our great city. Mark?
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. As we were preparing for just to try to recap what that day and week after and ultimately months took place to really take us from those initial calls that happened that morning through really three passes. We had several discussions in Public Works, and today just hopefully I can kind of take you back and give you some perspective of how this all came about, how many people, as the mayor had said, really came together as a team, essentially started to almost immediately go into 12-hour shifts so we could address the issue of the hour and ultimately make sure that we could get the city back to some level of normalcy until we got it completely addressed. So I still remember today where Galen Hubert called me that morning, and I think it was around 7:30, and Galen had said, "Say, Mark, we're getting a lot of calls from Central Sioux Falls. We've got branches down, we've got some power lines down, and the phones are heating up. They're starting to back up." And he wasn't very far away from where I was at, so he swung by, picked me up, and we quickly drove, which if you're familiar with the snow removal map area, is really Zone 2 was initially where we got the majority of the calls, which is that central part of Sioux Falls. And we didn't have to drive very far before we knew that this issue was going to be significant, was going to be devastating. And we went back. I made a phone call to the fire chief, called the mayor, and said, it's time, we've got to open up the Emergency Operations Center. This is going to be a significant cleanup effort. With the level of damage that happened to the overhead power system and the branches, a lot of activity needed to happen right away to actually get some sense of pathways established in our neighborhood streets so our first responders could actually start to conduct themselves during this phase 1 of this cleanup. So as we opened up the Emergency Operations Center, and if you ever had the opportunity to see that, it's a significant team of people that all have their roles from logistics to procurement, and you really start to address the issue of the moment, many times the issue of the 30 minutes or the hour, and you just really capture, when you get that many sort of high-functioning people in one area and the amount of resources that the city of Sioux Falls has, you can really address a significant disaster with these high-functioning people, okay? I think, if you remember what the average person's daily commute was that morning, they were also going off, they were going to work, they were taking their kids to school, and they continually rerouted because they would come to a street that either had a power line down or a branch or a combination of both, and just constantly rerouting, trying to get out to one of the arterial streets, and not having any sense of what's happened, because it happened so fast, as the mayor had said, with that temperature change and the level of devastation that happened in such a short amount of time. One of the things that we're fortunate to have here in the city is we have one of the best mapping teams in the country. They started a map really where the heat areas of all the high volume calls were coming, so we could start to direct some of those efforts. And then we also started to develop a grid system of how we were going to start to clear the city as we could focus on certain areas of town, and once we knew that those areas were cleared, we could check off and go to the next one. One of the items we heard right away was fire had a number of calls. They had dozens of calls right away that they couldn't get down these roads, and so we had to immediately spin up the forestry team and pair them up with loaders and sanders that had blades, just to simply go out, cut a tree branch, open up the road so a fire truck could actually go down it, or a paramedic's car could go down it. And then ultimately, whether it was Excel or Light and Power or one of the other two power providers in town, they could actually start to get to some of their assets, because in that central part of Sioux Falls, there's so much overhead power that they just are stranded until we could actually, do an initial roadway opening and get them to some of their assets. We had a separate team then. We knew the level of debris that had come down. We had a whole separate team focus on establishing 4 debris management sites. And those debris management sites needed scales. Those scales came in from Webster, South Dakota. And we needed sites that could handle probably, over 100 trucks an hour. And so they had to be firm even this time of year. And so we strategically located those debris management sites, got people to stand those up. Dozers had to be delivered to those sites so we could actually keep pushing the debris up as it got trucked in. And then there was a separate set of team members in this emergency operations group that started to hire every available contractor in our region that had skid steers, dump trucks, excavators, anything that would work efficiently to start picking up the debris. And then almost seamlessly, we started to direct areas, and citizens were working with contractors and the Department of Corrections inmates, and to start sweeping areas of town. And ultimately, in just a few weeks, we swept the town 3 times. You'll see some of the stats on the boards. I know Regan will share some of those stats. Just the volume of work that happened in a very short period of time to actually start to not only get the roads back open, get power restored, and then start to be able to clean up the level of devastation that came from all these tree branches down. When you talk about the Emergency Operations Center and the high functioning people that work in there, they had hundreds of things that they had to address every day. And so, like, one of them we're not in a heavily timbered area, so we didn't have any timber grapples that go on our skid steers. And so to actually be efficient at coming up to a pile that a citizen would have piled out in front, we needed those grapples that could grab it efficiently, raise them up. That team had to go out and try to find and procure every one in probably a 3-state area. And so once those all got shipped in, we needed them yesterday. Then once they got done tackling that, they would address the next issue. And so just hundreds of decisions get done on a daily basis to make sure that we can start to efficiently do our jobs. I'd mentioned before, almost immediately, city teams started to work 12-hour shifts, and we were working 6 and 7 days until the effort was done. Private contractors were working that extensive amount of hours, and you didn't even think about it. You just immediately did it. And, I would also say financially, very few cities would have the financial resources and the equipment to start that level of effort and then start to hire all the private contractors so you can effectively restore some level of normalcy in your city. And so just two other points I think is so important. Always establishes how important it is to have backup generation for critical infrastructure like water facilities, wastewater facilities, so we could continue to manage all your water needs and all your wastewater needs throughout this period of time. And then the other part is just mutual aid agreements. Our light and power team, almost our entire area had blackouts, brownouts, no power, and we brought in mutual aid from Brookings and Beersford. They were extremely helpful in helping our team really get our territory back going and restoring that power. Some of us, I know I was out of power for 3 days. Some people were out of power for longer than that. And so just very fortunate to see all the partnerships come together, all the agencies work together, and to really see this citywide devastation get organized and cleaned up. So, Mayor, with that, I think Regan's going to share some stats.
Thanks, Mark. Regan Smith, Emergency Manager, City of Sioux Falls. As has been stated, the April 2013 ice storm presented really the most significant disaster to impact the City of Sioux Falls and its residents in many, many years. There was a massive amount of debris. Those first 72 hours, a large number of public safety calls. Our 911 center was overwhelmed with calls, blocked roads, extended power outage to our community, school closures. So really just about everybody in the community was impacted in some way. But leadership from many city departments, Minnehaha and Lincoln County, state of South Dakota, volunteer agencies, Xcel Energy, and private contractors came together in a coordinated manner under that incident command system to minimize threats to life safety and return to the community to a state of normalcy in a relatively short amount of time. The overall response and cleanup cost came to $8 million. The federal government reimbursed the City of Sioux Falls $6 million of that, and FEMA closed out that project in September of 2017. I'm not going to go into, afterwards we can go through the stats on the boards as how many tons. It's just overwhelming, 55 tons, 900 stumps, 25,000 dangerous branches, and all the resources that took to did it. But that's all back there, and you can take a look at that. We can talk about that afterwards. After we have any event, whether it's small or large, we go back after we're done with it and figure out, well, how did we do? What worked? What didn't work? I think looking at our wins, first off, operational coordination, that incident command system, which we've got outlined in our city emergency operation plan, worked well. We developed a daily incident action plan, so we're all working off those same goals and priorities, understand who's going to do what. We integrated resources outside our normal city operations into one single operation or team, and the City Emergency Operations Center was open for 21 days straight. Public information, we were charged to over-communicate with the public, and we did that well. We did daily or maybe even twice daily press conferences, utilized social media, enhanced our website with just a ton of information to the public as far as maps. They could figure out what day that we were coming to pick up their branches, how to hire an arborist, on and on and on. And so there was information there. And then finally, we've got a great partnership with 211 Helpline Center. So within an hour, we had that line go live. They're part of our public information team. So we directed the public for their non-emergency calls to go there for more information on how to get help, how to volunteer for help, on and on and on. And that relieved our 911 center and then our city lines. So, and then finally, and the most important thing is life safety, whether it's our responders, the workers that came in, or the general public. Safety is always going to be our #1 priority in every incident, and I'm happy and proud to say we didn't have any deaths or major injuries. And so that was good work by the citizens, by our team, and by the safety personnel we put out in the field. In our after action and improvement plan, some of the key components are we've enhanced our training for that city multi-agency coordination team that handles incidents like this. We've updated and developed a more comprehensive debris management plan. And finally, we've obtained advanced training on debris management for our public works, finance, park, and emergency management team. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Don Kearney with Parks and Recreation. My comments really are more about after Operation Timber Strike came to a close. And the first thing I'd like to share is one of the lessons learned, or the things that we realized was really important. And that's one of the things we already had in place through our forestry division, and that was to make sure that we had a requirement for licensing of arborists and tree trimming folks here in our community. As you know, everybody came to town wanting to clean up everybody's property, but one of the things that we insisted upon is that, like everybody else that currently does that work in Sioux Falls, they also needed to either sit for the exam or already be a certified arborist, but more importantly probably, or as important, is that they were insured, so that anybody doing work in the city right away or on private property, they were licensed and insured, and that continues to be something that we implement to this day. Some of the other things that I think are important regarding Operation Timber Strike is that in the past 5 years, we've planted over 1,800 trees back into our park system. We've evaluated approximately 13,000 park system trees for restorative pruning. We've also removed approximately 800 trees in the park system, including some severely damaged trees. And then we've also removed approximately 1,200 street trees, again, that were largely severely damaged that didn't make it through the ice storm, to be able to remove those hazards from our public right-of-way. You know, I think as you look at the pictures behind me, you can see when everybody drove by our McKinnon Park or any of the other parks that are heavily wooded, you thought, how are we ever going to recover from this? It looked like a bomb went off. But I think the lesson learned is that because of Operation Timber Strike and our implementation of that response plan in a professional way and our efforts since that time leading up to today, I think what we're finding is that our urban forest can be really resilient and it can respond. I think if you go by McKinnon Park or any other park in town that maybe was severely hit, I think you'll see that we've responded in a very positive fashion. And just can't thank everybody that was involved in this process to make sure that our urban forest recovered as well as it did. So, thank you.